Out, Out by Robert Frost, page 33 of the Edexcel anthology. You should now read the poem in the anthology. It would be a good idea to print it out so that you can write notes on it later. You should also grab a highlighter and maybe a couple of pens. Pause the video and restart it when you've read the poem. Okay, let's start by summarising what happens in the poem. This poem was written in 1916 and set on a farm in New England in America. Apparently Frost, the poet, had read about a young man on a farm who'd cut off his hand in an accident and died from blood loss and shock. In the poem, a young man is using a buzzsaw. This is a kind of machine for cutting wood. The boy is distracted and accidentally cuts his hand. The wound is very bad and the doctor is sent for. The young man fears his hand will be cut off, but the hand is already gone. When the doctor arrives, he can do nothing to help the young man except to ease the pain with ether. Ether is a kind of painkiller or anaesthetic. The young man dies. The people on the farm are obviously very sad, but life goes on and they must return to their work. So now you know what the poem is about. Let's look at the language used in the poem. It is very important to look at the poet's choice of words because Frost will have spent a long time deciding what words to use and what to leave out. Therefore, we should assume that every word in every line is there for a reason and to mean something to us. Remember that it is a good idea to pause the video and write notes on the printed version of the poem. The first thing to point out is the title, Out, Out. This is a reference to Shakespeare's play, Macbeth. In the play, Macbeth is told that his wife is dead. He then begins to talk about how brief life is and how easily people die. He begins by saying, Out, out, brief candle, suggesting that people die as easily as a candle is snuffed out. So we know this poem is about how fragile life is. In the first line, there is a description of the buzzsaw. Frost uses personification to make the saw sound like a wild animal. It snarled like it was alive. Personification is a kind of imagery where objects are given the characteristics of living things. Frost also says that it rattled. This is an example of onomatopoeia. That is using a word that is a written version of a sound like bang or crash. Frost does this to emphasise how noisy the machine is. Frost also describes the strong smell of the freshly chopped wood, sweet-scented stuff when the breeze drew across it. This paints a very attractive and peaceful scene. Frost uses alliteration of S sounds to create this beautiful and peaceful scene. He also describes the mountains and the sunset. The beauty of these descriptions is a contrast to the violence of the snarling buzzsaw, which snarled and rattled, snarled and rattled. Notice the repetition in these lines. Frost does this to make us notice that the machine never stops. It keeps on chopping. Because it's evening time and the day is nearly over, the poet wishes that someone might have said, call it a day. That is, finish work and go home. He notes that it would have made the boy happy to finish half an hour early. Half an hour that a boy counts so much to be saved from work. This line is maybe showing us how young and innocent the boy was, because finishing work early would be a big deal to him. The boy's sister has come to tell him that supper is ready and she distracts him. The saw leapt out at the boy's hand. Of course, it didn't really leap, but this again makes the saw sound like an animal. The saw is personified. What really happened is that the boy must have pushed his hand into the saw by accident. He must have given the hand. Frost's tone here is almost comical. Neither refused the meeting, as though the boy and the snarling saw were just shaking hands like friends. Of course, this is not meant to be very funny. It is meant to meant to make us think about how such stupid things happen. We've all done it. It could be cutting ourselves by accident in the kitchen or tripping up on a step. However, Frost's next word are very simple. But the hand. Notice how the poet does not try to describe the bloody mess and the hand torn from the boy's arm. It's just a simple exclamation, as though it's too horrible to try and describe it, and we, the reader, must try to imagine it for ourselves. When the boy sees what is done, he's clearly in shock, as his first reaction is a rueful laugh. Rueful means sorry or sad. So the words rueful and laugh are opposites. Again, this is just a reaction we can all understand. We know when something really bad happens and there is not much that you can do about it, then sometimes the only thing you can do is to laugh. The boy stumbles to his friends, waving the bloody stump at them in appeal, probably for help. He also lifts it up to keep the life from spilling. Obviously, Frost means the blood. He says it in this way to remind us that when all the blood spills out of us, it can only mean death. It is then that the seriousness of what had happened hits the boy. He's old enough to use the saw, big boy doing a man's job. So he's old enough to know that he will probably have what's left of his hand chopped off by the doctor. He begs his sister not to let this happen. His sister is clearly like a mother figure to him here. She is the only one who can offer him protection. Why is the hand so important? Well, the hand symbolises a man's ability to take control over his own life, to be able to do things for himself. Without a hand, we are helpless, unable to work. Later, presumably after the boy has been put to bed, the doctor visits him and puts him in the dark of ether. This is a powerful description of using the drug to ease the boy's pain. However, the use of the word dark is also a hint at death, which is fast approaching. The watcher by his bed, possibly a member of his family, feels his pulse and realises that his heart has stopped. He has bled to death. The boy's death is described very simply at the end of the poem. Frost does this because he wants to point out how easily life is lost, and that ended it. What is really remarkable is the way that other people react. Because they're not dead, they have to get on with things, they turn to their affairs. This sounds really cruel. Nobody grieves, nobody's upset, they just go back to work. However, what good would grieving or sadness do? The boy's dead and nothing will change that. This rather harsh view is perhaps a little old-fashioned today. Maybe people 100 years ago were more used to death.